Hey everybody, today I am taking out my DIY mild to wild dual mode exhaust controller. I actually got this remote on eBay and then got an ATA circuit and wired it up, modified the ATA circuit a little bit. Of course the fuse is gone, I put it back in the fuse block, and so I'm taking that out and I'm going to be modifying it to a three-way, which actually grounds the relay so it will close the exhaust flap. So let me show you some of what I'm doing. Okay, so I got the switch, and this is a cover I had made. Now, this is going to be lighted and it's going to dim with the dimmer lights. I'm going to wire it into that circuit. This is just a cover. It was like 10 bucks for this option. It's just what I chose it to say. You can put whatever you want on there apparently. So here's the wiring for the switch. So you'll notice the lights are separate from the switch. So one of these is going to be grounded. The other one, when it's flipped, will ground the ECM to the relay, allowing it to go into auto mode. The other one will just ground it directly, forcing the relay to close the flapper. So you'll have three modes. Let me show you the schematic. So here is a portion of the fuse block, which is there. I actually took it away from its little mount. It was a little bit difficult. You had to put a screwdriver in each of the corners and kind of pull as it unhooked. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to make sure on this relay that number 86, which is right here, number 86, was actually blue and yellow, and it is. So here you can see the ECM and the communication between the control module. So when the ECM tells the control module to go to ground, it closes this and closes the flaps. So what we're going to do is we're going to interrupt the blue and yellow and run it through the switch like this. So these are not momentary ons, they are stay on. Obviously you want it to stay on, you don't want a momentary action. So this is how it's going to be wired in. So now I just need to actually find the blue and yellow. I did find it on the back of the block in there. It is in there, it's kind of tucked away, hard to see, but trust me, it's in there. So I'm going to follow it up into the loom and then cut it and extend it out to the switch. So I was going to put the switch here, which is the sunroof switch, because there's no sunroof, but I decided against it. For one, I had a little bit of trouble getting this out. I didn't want to beat it all up with a screwdriver. There's a couple screws in there that have to be removed, so I think this has to come out first. And when I got thinking about it, running the wires through the headliner, and it just seemed like it would kind of be a pain in the butt. And I didn't see the switch very well. I mean, I couldn't really read it. So I want to be able to read the switch. So I've seen some guys use a very small micro switch and put it in here, you know, something that's not all fancy and lit up, but just a three-way switch put here would probably be the easiest place to put it that's accessible. I wanted to actually have it out, so I'm going to put it here. Yes, I'm going to be putting a hole in that. Nice thing about GM is if I decide I want to replace this, and you know, I can buy another one and get rid of that hole. But yes, I'm going to put it here. It's going to be accessible and easy for me to change on the spot. I don't have to go into my console. And I've already tested it. There's plenty of room. These things just pop off. This is great. I really like this. But right here, I've already checked it. There's just tons of room for that switch. And I can just run the wire back and down, just like everybody else did, and back into the trunk where my blue and yellow wire is. So we're gonna get to work on that. All right, so I pulled some of this tape off, and just in case you're back here and are wondering, these blue clip things here, it's kind of hard to see with that light. There's one there and one across the top. Those are just safeties to help hold in the sockets so they don't accidentally get unclipped in there and fall out. Those don't need to be removed. And you can see this bundle of wires, mostly red, but there is the blue and yellow one right there. Right there. So we're going to cut that one, and we're going to get a ground ready to test it on the relay side. We're going to leave the upper side just disconnected, just as if it's not connected, and we're going to ground the relay side to make sure it operates the flaps before we go any further. All right, so as you can see, I cut the blue and yellow stripe wire, put a ground lead on it, made sure my relay was back in, oriented properly, because it's 4-pin, it's easy to mess up and get it upside down. And then connected my ground and turned the ignition on, and when I ground it, okay, you can hear the relay. Obviously the flaps aren't moving because there's no vacuum in the vacuum tank. So I'm going to go ahead and start the car a little bit, get a vacuum going. So it does in fact move the flap. I actually looked in there with the flashlight, and the flap closes and opens. Got a face full of water and exhaust, so that was fun. The ignition is off, so nothing happens, which is good because that would be a current drain. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take this wire and the other end that I clipped, and I'm going to extend them out with a nice long piece of, couple long pieces of wire. I'm going to shrink wrap and solder my joints and heat shrink it, and then wrap that all up, and then put that back together and have the wires hanging out so I can get ready to run my switch, and this end will be done. All right, so I found some wire. You can get this stuff at Napa. It's 16 gauge, 3 conductor. The reason I got the flat stuff is so if I have to run it through carpet or in a tight spot, it's a little easier. So I made the green the ground because that makes sense to me. And I made a little connector, crimped it and then soldered it. And that's gonna go onto that bolt there. I decided to run the ground all the way to the switch. That way I don't have to try to find a ground where I mount the switch. It'll just use the wiring that's already gonna be here. And then it didn't really matter which color to me here, but I just put yellow going to the relay, and then this brown one going to the ECM, or that other controller. So technically, if I take this yellow one and ground it to the green one, once this one is grounded, when I short the wire out on the other end of this 25-foot run, it should trip the flap to close. So I want to make sure that's going to happen with this long piece of wire, and if it does, then I know it'll work when I cut it short. I'm sure if you guys are doing this, a lot of you probably already know how to solder, but soldering your joints is always a good way to go. Solder your joint, cover it with some heat shrink, and you don't have to worry about the joints coming apart or corroding or giving you problems later. Ooh-wee. And I tell you, I'm not a little kid anymore. It's hard getting in this space. So I put it in some split loom, just the wire, zip tied it to that, and ran it over there and down there. It's going behind the back seat. So here's the back seat. The back is down. So that's the split loom. This is all just kind of, it's pretty flexible. You just run it back, and there's lots of space down here. And I ran it down there, and then I pushed it down this way. And the bottom cushion actually pops up. And I just ran it under there, and there it is right there. That's as much split loom as I had, but I just really wanted it in the trunk. So now I'm gonna run it underneath the carpet and through the console. All right, so my idea was to bring the wire underneath this carpet and inside to the wheel well, or the console, and run it up along the side here, along the side piece. These just pop off. You just grab under here and just pop them out. They come out super easy. I'm gonna take this off because I think it might help me get it under the carpet. I tried just kind of lifting the carpet from underneath the back seat. I lifted this up and tried pulling on it, and it doesn't move a lot. And there's quite a bit of curve there, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to fish this wire through or not with this in the way. And it is held on with a couple of Phillips, so I'm going to take that out. Phillips on both sides. Alright, so I tucked a long big screwdriver underneath the carpet just to kind of help make a tunnel while I kind of push the wire through, and kind of got my finger over there. It was actually quite a bit of room. I just kept kind of moving it back and forth until I saw the tip of it come through, and I grabbed it and pulled it out. I put a little heat shrink over it to make it so it doesn't snag. You could put some tape or something, would work. So, well, it's pulling through, so now it's just a matter of running it up the side behind this cover, assembling that, putting the seat back, and putting the trunk back together. So because I want these lights to dim, I wanted to find the dimming circuit, and I know these lights dim and they're close to where the switch is going to be. So I determined by going into the service manual on this particular year and model that yellow and black are negative and positive for the dimming circuit. So of course that plugs in there, and yellow and black was right there, so I figured out, okay, it's those pins, bottom right, and just the one to the left of it would be the negative. And so I just rigged up a little bit of test wire and touched 9 volt to it, and sure enough it lights those. So I know I'm correct and that the service manual is pointing me in the right direction. So I'm going to tie into these with this wire. Yeah, this wire's bigger than what it needs to be, but it's what I have, and I wanted to keep it yellow and black. So I'm going to tie into that and then use this wire to dim my switch. So in this case, because it's just lighting, I went ahead and used these blue taps. Seem to work pretty good. It's not a ground, it's not power, it's not signal, so I'm not too worried about it. As long as it doesn't get wet, I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up with some friction tape and connect it back to the car, and then put a bulb on there and make sure it works. Looks like they work. Okay, so this is where I'm getting my information. So there's a traction control switch. So you're seeing what is an LED. That's what those arrows mean. It's a light diode, not a regular diode. There's a black wire, there's the yellow wire. So that's where we tapped in. All right, well, that was easy to cut. I just made a cardboard template with the 83 thousandths by 1.4 that is recommended for the hole on the switch. Taped it over it on the back and slowly started tracing it out with an X-Acto knife until it poked through. Took a little while, but it's precise. And as soon as I get my switch in, I will show you a video of that. Now, it is far enough forward that the seat isn't going to rub, at least for my height, and there's no short people going to be driving my car. So anyway, when I get the switch in, I'll bring you guys back. All right, so I got the switch wired up. I tested it. It works. So at an idle, which you probably want to be able to hear me talking if I actually had the car on. At an idle, if I hit the on button, this will light up and it will engage the NPP at idle. Turn it off, no lights on, no NPP at all, so it's just wide open as if you pulled the fuse. And then if you put auto, then of course at idle it's still open because the ECU hasn't closed it until it reaches that RPM. So this is stock setting, this is fuse pulled, and that is on all the time. So I ended up using a double pole, double throw switch with independent lights because I didn't want to introduce any strange ground onto the ground that operates the NPP because the ECU's involved. Grounds can have different potential at times. I didn't want to have to measure it and figure it out if it would work and do all that, so I just kept the grounds for the lighting separate from the grounds that operate the NPP. So the red wires here is just switching the lighting. So when the switch is, I know the switch is upside down, but when this switch is switched like that, this light here is on this switch over here because that's how it goes. So if you look at the diagram of the switch, it's actually crisscross. So this switch here is operating on this side. So I actually had to crisscross them, which I didn't know at first. I wasn't paying attention. All I did was when I pushed this on, this light came on, and when I pushed that on, that light came on. So I just had to flip-flop them. And then here's the yellow for the dimmer. That's the positive. And then the black for the dimmer on each corner, as you can see. So these are lights across here, these two, and on these two, these are lights. And then of course you have the actual NPP control, which is the ground, and then the two active and ECU. So got these backwards too. When I turned it on, it wasn't doing anything. When I turned it to auto, it would turn them on. So I just flipped these two. I just flipped them around. So can't hurt anything as long as you don't short anything out. And keep the lighting on one side of the switch and the actual NPP on the other side, and you won't have any problems. So I'm gonna stuff this in there best I can and show you how it works. this is the horrible drawing of my switch, how it's wired. Double pole, double throw with independent lamps. I think you could have got a switch that had a different setup with the lamps if you just wanted the lamps to come on with each function on. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, so I just kind of got the universal and wired it. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope it wasn't too confusing, and as always, have a great day.